Now, recently, from Adam Driver himself, we learned about a post sequel trilogy Kylo Ren movie that almost happened. And I know I talked about this in a video on my other channel yesterday, but I wanted to talk a bit more about it here. And if you didn't see that video and you haven't heard about this yet, basically in 2021, Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, she reached out to Adam Driver to see if he had any interest in coming back to Star Wars, despite the little inconvenient fact that his character, Kylo Ren, dies at the end of The Rise of Skywalker and his body disappears, with him presumably becoming a Force ghost, though he isn't actually seen in that form. Anyway, Driver, who said he loved his character and loved Star Wars and would consider coming back to it if it had the right story for him and the right director to go along with it, he apparently took this very seriously and he decided to reach out to filmmaker Steven Soderbergh, who is also a friend of his. And with the help of Rebecca Blunt, they outlined a story that they then took to Scott Z. Burns, who wrote a script that Driver said was one of the coolest effing scripts I have ever been a part of. They then took that script back to Lucasfilm and showed it to Kathleen Kennedy, Carrie Beck, and Dave Filoni, and they all seemed to like it and were on board with actually making this movie. So they then took it to Disney, where Bob Iger and Alan Bergman said, I don't understand this. I don't understand how Kylo Ren or Ben Solo, the name or title of the movie was actually going to be The Hunt for Ben Solo. But the bigwigs at Disney said they don't understand how Ben Solo or Kylo Ren could still be alive. And again, he does die and disappear at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, so you can understand their confusion. And so that would then be that. The movie died right there and then. And first of all, here, as interesting as it may have been to actually get this movie, I do think there was some serious squandered potential when it came to Kylo Ren in the sequels, though there was squandered potential everywhere in the sequels, but especially with Kylo or his character. But there is a part of me that is morbidly curious as to what this movie would have actually been. Especially again considering that, yes, Ben Solo very much died. So would he have rematerialized somewhere after turning into presumably a Force ghost? And could maybe Luke do that as well? But either way, if he did come back, how exactly would he have come back? Would it have been explained this time, or would it have just somehow happened? Furthermore, I'm assuming the name The Hunt for Ben Solo implies this was more of a introspect, more of a personal hunt for his true self by Kylo or Ben Solo himself. Not that it would be a literal hunt for him by someone else, though I am curious if Rey would have known that he had somehow returned. Would she have felt her dyad partner come back from the dead? Or was the bond maybe broken after Kylo or Ben gave his life force energy to bring her back from the dead? And either way, would Daisy Ridley have been a part of this project? Would she have been in the movie? And just what would the story have actually been then? Again, I'm curious, and maybe I'll make a video going into some theories or what I do with it some other time if people are interested in that sort of thing. I already got some fun ideas. I just don't know that this is the time and place for them. Either way, I can't say I blame Adam Driver for wanting to do this. I'm sure he was rather disappointed in the direction his character took in the sequel trilogy. He was even under the impression that Kylo Ren was going to do, or his arc was going to be, a sort of reverse Darth Vader, which is basically to say he thought his journey would be the opposite of Vader's in the original trilogy, where Vader starts very much on the dark side, but comes back to the light in the end. Adam Driver thought Kylo would start out a bit conflicted, feeling the pull to the light, as he even says in The Force Awakens, only to end the trilogy absolutely on the dark side and probably needing to be killed. But even though I understand Adam Driver's side of this, his desire to want to do this, I'm not sure I understand Lucasfilms or their decision making ability here. And sure, as we're actually seeing with their current plan to go all in on Rey, I do think they desperately want to fix the sequel trilogy. Not saying they're going about it the right way by going all in on Rey, but I understand wanting to fix those films. There's no way they don't understand the damage those movies did either. The damage they did to the franchise and how many fans turned away because of them. They'll never admit it, but that doesn't mean they don't know it and discuss it behind closed doors when trying to figure out what do we do with Star Wars now? How do we fix those movies? Problem is, I don't see how bringing Ben Solo back, especially if it had somehow been the first movie after The Rise of Skywalker, the first movie after the end of the Skywalker saga, as they themselves, as Lucasfilm said it would be, I don't know how you make the first movie back then a hunt for a Skywalker, which, yes, Ben Solo certainly is a Skywalker, even if he doesn't have the Skywalker name. Not to mention just having a certain name or the Skywalker name, I don't think that qualifies you as a Skywalker necessarily either. Anyway, for better or worse, I think if, say, the Hunt for Ben Solo had been made, absolutely everybody would have laughed at it. People would have been ripping on it and quoting the whole "no one's ever really gone" line. I think after somehow Palpatine returned in The Rise of Skywalker, if Lucasfilm would have followed it up by making a movie where Ben Solo somehow returns too, no one or even less people would take Star Wars seriously. In fact, I actually can't believe that Lucasfilm was behind the idea that Kennedy was even the one to reach out to Adam Driver in the first place. And I think Disney or Bob Iger, I think they actually made the right call here. However, this whole story about an almost Ben Solo movie and how Lucasfilm seemed to want to do it, and Disney said no, it really makes one ask the question, who is truly to blame for the state of Star Wars? How many times has perhaps a Lucasfilm or Kennedy or someone there had an idea that Disney went ahead and shot down, and maybe it was a good idea they shot down? And in reverse, how many times has Disney just said, hey, you're gonna do this idea no matter what? How many times has Disney forced Lucasfilm to do something they didn't think was a good idea? For example, and I've gotten pushback from some for this theory, but I do believe there's a really, really good chance that The Mandalorian Season 3 is the fault of Disney more so than the fault of Favreau, Filoni, Kennedy, or anyone else specifically at Lucasfilm. I believe the idea to put Grogu and Mando back together so quickly, so quick that it even happened in another show, that it was a command sent down from on high, from Disney, that they were saying, there's no way we're going to do a season of that show, spend all that money, and not have the little green guy in there to drive subscriptions and just sell some merchandise. They're just not going to do a season without him in there. We also do know that many of the problems or mistakes with the sequel trilogy were the fault of Bob Iger himself, that he, in his own book, he talks about the decisions he made in regards to those films, starting with his pursuit of Star Wars in the first place, that he bugged the hell out of George Lucas until he finally sold his company, even promising Lucas the future of Star Wars would be in good hands, that they would respect the legacy of Star Wars under the Disney umbrella. Bob Iger also heavily implied, and he even admits this again in his own book, that he may have given Lucas the wrong impression about the sequels, that they were going to use his outline, that they were going to use George Lucas's outline, and that was part of the reason Lucas sold, and then they didn't. Iger also was the one immediately after acquiring Lucasfilm, and I mean like the same day, that he was the one who fast-tracked the sequel, saying or announcing that first day that they would be out, the first movie in the sequel trilogy would be out in 2015, instead of, oh, I don't know, taking time to get those movies and the future of the Star Wars franchise right. To maybe have the first movie come out whenever it was good and ready, not to rush it just because you wanted to take advantage of the hype, which is what he admitted he did. He wanted it out as quick as possible because he didn't want the hype to die down. Furthermore, it was also his idea to make the sequels a sort of a soft reboot for the franchise, to have a blend of old and new characters, instead of, oh, I don't know, just giving the old characters their own movie first to let them be heroes, once again, heroes together, and to show that the galaxy and they themselves hadn't gone to hell in the meantime or since the original trilogy ended. We even know that Iger personally approved of the hiring of J.J. Abrams as the writer and director of the first film, and was cool with the idea of Starkiller Base. He was cool with yet another Death Star, only much, much bigger this time. It's also kind of interesting to note here that something like Andor, the series, was actually fought for by none other than Kathleen Kennedy, that Tony Gilroy has thanked her repeatedly for getting him what he needed, including the ridiculous budget the show had, and that she, Kennedy, kept Disney from meddling in Gilroy's vision for the project. And no, this certainly isn't a defense of Kathleen Kennedy or anything of the sort. She deserves plenty of blame for the current state of Star Wars too. Heck, she was apparently cool with the idea of the Ben Solo movie, which, yeah, like I said, I'm curious to know what it was. It may have actually been good, I suppose. But I really do think it would have been mocked and laughed at to have Ben Solo somehow return after his death in the previous movie and after Palpatine's return in the one before that. Basically, here, the downfall of Star Wars was very much a team effort. And no, that's not some sort of amazing revelation I have just uncovered. It's been pretty common knowledge for a while that it was a team effort. But all this time, I've wondered just what does go on behind the scenes at Lucasfilm and how much does Disney get involved? Is Kennedy pulling most of the strings, or is Disney basically just pulling hers? And to me, I don't know, it feels like the fall of Star Wars might actually be more on the shoulders of Bob Iger than anyone else, which I don't say lightly, given the contributions of others as well, mainly again Kathleen Kennedy. They have all played a part here. But in Iger's own book, he talked about how acquiring Star Wars was the opportunity of a lifetime, his chance to bring the biggest, most beloved franchise in history under the Disney banner. And once he had it, he needed to make sure it produced as much as the shareholders expected or demanded that it made back, and then some, that $4 billion price tag they spent on it. And ironically, or fittingly, you could argue, I think it was his micromanaging, even more so than anything that Kathleen Kennedy or anyone else has done, that probably led Star Wars into the rough spot it's currently in today. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Just a little something for you all to think about and discuss in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you think or who you think the bulk of the blame falls upon, or if there's just enough blame to go around when it comes to what happened to Star Wars. Whatever you think, though, whatever the case may be, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.